My name is Matt Urbaugh. I'm one of the pastors here. Happy July 4th. Hope you guys are having a great Independence Day weekend. It was so awesome yesterday getting to celebrate 250 years, and I only have minor burns, so that was a good success. Hey, we are going to be jumping back into our summer series this morning. If you were here with us last week, it was a great time of getting to celebrate all that God did during Spark in our families and with our kids. But like I said, we're jumping back into the summer series, which is the Family of Promise. And speaking of families, as you've seen already, we have our kids in July joining us in service. And it's a special thing that we get to do this month. We love having the chance, kids, for you guys to be in here, worshiping with us, learning together. And as you can see, we've got some strategically placed tables. There's a couple of them in the back. At the end of the service, we are going to get to do one of the ordinances in the church. We're going to get to celebrate communion together. And it's a joyful thing to celebrate communion with all of you guys this morning. I do want to say, and we'll get more instructions on how we're going to do communion at the end right before we do it, but communion is one of those things that it's not for everybody necessarily in this room to partake in. When we partake of communion, it's a very reverent moment of getting to proclaim as you do it that you are a joyful follower of Jesus, that you are proclaiming his death and resurrection, and that you are a part of his family. So what that means is this is not a thing for everybody to partake in, but I don't want it to sound like an exclusion thing. It's an invitation thing. And so kids, when we come to that time, you can talk to your parents and they'll help you know if you're supposed to take it. I remember as a child in church, there were times where I wasn't there yet, and my parents, I got to watch it happen, which was a great thing. And adults, if you have not made that decision to be in the family of God, hear the invitation this morning. If you have more questions at the end of the service, feel free to talk to me or Pastor Brian or any of our pastors and staff. We'd love to tell you more about what that invitation means. All right, but today, before we get to that, what I really want to talk about is bread. Bread is one of the elements that we're going to partake in communion, but bread is actually something that is all throughout the Bible. And I think when we talk about this family of promise, and we're really stewarding this word that the Lord has for us this year, strengthening the family to multiply. There's a special thing, there's a lesson the Lord has for us in bread, believe it or not, that will help us to understand what he means by strengthening us. And so if you have your Bible, would you go ahead and turn? We're going to be in Exodus again. Exodus chapter 16 is where we're going to start. And we're going to put the timeline up. As you guys are turning there, I'm going to put this timeline back up to just sort of help us to get our bearings, remind us where we're at in the story. All right, this is sort of the second half of the family tree, the family of promise that we've been. Of course, it starts with Abraham. Abraham has a son, Isaac, and then Jacob. And then Jacob has the 12 sons that you see there at the top of our family tree. And we talked about Joseph, and we already went through that story. Now, remember, the Lord had started a family with an old man with a barren wife that says, I'm going to multiply you greatly. And these 12 sons are just sort of the down payment of that. But now, since that story, we've advanced several hundred years. And the promise is being fulfilled because now scholars estimate there are probably close to 2 million Israelites, but they had been slaves in Egypt. This is the part of the story where Moses comes down. Nino talked about this one. Moses comes down, a representation of Jesus, delivering people from their physical bondage. And of course, a couple weeks ago, we were out in Mount Sinai in the desert after they had made their escape. But you see that little line between Moses and the law. We're going to actually go backwards a little bit in time because I want to talk a little bit about an event that happens where that line is. Just after they've passed through the Red Sea, these couple million Israelites find themselves in a desert. Now, kids, think about this for a moment. What is there to eat in a desert? Not a whole lot, right? And they're on the move. It's not like you can plant crops. I mean, they wouldn't grow well in a desert anyway, but you're going to be gone by the time that they would grow. And I guess you could hunt a little bit, but I can't imagine finding enough food for about 2 million people. And so they're in the desert, and you know what happens when you're hungry? Have you ever heard the word hangry? Hangry, kids, you know what hangry is? It's when you're hungry and you start to get angry, and we put those words together, you get a little bit hangry. That happens a lot in our family, and there are certain family members that get more hangry than other family members, and I'm not going to tell you which ones those are, but that was actually happening to the Israelites in this moment. They're starting to grumble and complain. Some of them are saying, man, remember back in Egypt? We had food back there, right? Did God bring us out here just to kill us? And so they, I guess, have forgotten about the whole slavery thing, but they're just remembering the fondness of the food. And so the Lord says, okay, I'm going to feed my people. Exodus 16, we're going to be jumping around a little bit. We're going to start in verses 4 and 5 here. So the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you. And the people shall go out. He gives some instructions here, so pay attention to these. The people are going to go out, and they're going to gather a day's portion every day. And catch this phrase, that I might test them. That testing language we've already talked about a little bit because we saw that in Abraham's story as well. We'll explain it more in just a second. That I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. But on the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. Okay, let me just explain those instructions a little bit. So, first 6 days of the week, right? You're going to go out. There's going to be this bread that I've rained down from heaven. The bread, it said that there'd be like dew in the morning, and as soon as the dew lifted, there'd be this like powdery substance on the ground. And they're like, what is it, right? And then you could scoop it up. It was flaky, and it said it had the taste of honey. It was the manna, the bread from heaven. Every day you go out and just gather enough for that day. These are the instructions, just enough for the day. But on the sixth day, you're going to gather twice as much and prepare it ahead of time. That's because the seventh day is going to be the day of rest, right? So if you're resting, you're not supposed to go out and gather food. If you're resting, you're not supposed to prepare food that you've had. You're supposed to have done that already. So the sixth day, he says, prepare twice as much. And he says this is going to be a test for them. I want to unpack that word test a little bit because sometimes we carry some baggage with that word, right? From school, we may hear that word test and think of something miserable, something that the teacher just is doing to make my life harder. It's pointless. We don't usually like tests. But I was actually a teacher for many years, 9 years as a Bible teacher, and taught 12 and 13-year-olds. I taught 7th grade. It's a special calling, 7th graders. And, here's how I view a test. I think this is the way the Lord wants us to view it as well. For a few weeks, I would be pouring in, hopefully, biblical wisdom to my students, pouring in truth, giving them applications, and I can't see how much it's really anchored into them. How much do they actually know? I know they're in the room, they're taking notes, they look like they're paying attention, but have they actually learned anything? And so about every 2 or 3 weeks, I would have a test, a chance for them to display what I can't see on the inside, right? How much truth do they know? They have a chance to display it in the test. But here's the other thing that a test I would try to leverage as much as possible because we would have reviews and review packets. In the preparation for the test, what they had already learned would actually be strengthened in them. So I think the way when the Lord says, I'm going to test them, one, he's saying, I want to display what is on the inside for them to see what they actually know. And I also want to strengthen the areas that are weak. And so this will give them an opportunity to do that because they've learned a lot in the past couple weeks. The Israelites have learned about the power of the Lord. They've witnessed the 10 plagues. They've learned that he is a God who saves, and they walked through the Red Sea. Hopefully they started to learn the lesson that this is a God that likes us and loves us, and we should trust in him. And so now they have a chance to display it. Exodus 16, skip down to verse 18. The manna falls, each of them goes out to gather as much as he could eat, and then Moses gives them that little instruction again. Let no one leave any of it till morning. You're just gathering enough for the day, remember. So don't hold on to any of it. Don't save any of it. And here's a little bit where the test comes into play because they're in a desert, right? They haven't had food in a while, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to find food anymore. Do you trust that God's going to miraculously rain down bread from heaven again? If you are, you're going to be like, great, saving enough for today, get rid of the rest. Why do I need it? He's going to give me more tomorrow. But if you're in your heart, you're like, yeah, I don't know. What if he doesn't come through, though? Just in case, I'm going to hold a little bit back and save it, just in case. Next verse, they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till morning, but it doesn't work out for them. It says it bred worms, the manna did. It stank, and Moses was angry with them. A lot of them are failing the test here. But like any good teacher, God has a makeup test. Verse 23, the sixth day arrives, and he says to them, this is what the Lord has commanded. Remember the instructions. Tomorrow is going to be a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over, this time you can save it. It said, lay aside and keep it till morning. And they're probably like, well, isn't it going to stink like it did last time? So they laid it aside till the morning as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink. And there were no worms in it. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is the Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather, but on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, there will be done. God's not going to put any manna out there, right? Because it's a day of rest. He's not tempting you to work, because these tests are not temptations. But on the seventh day, guess what happens? Some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. I remember when I was a Bible teacher in seventh grade, I remember teaching this lesson. And at this point in the story, all my students would be so frustrated with the Israelites, right? They would be like, oh, how can they be so foolish? Like, Moses must have been so angry. And they were not thinking highly of the Israelites. How could they not obey? Isn't it so obvious? And I would stand in front of that group of 13-year-olds and I would say, yeah, man, it must have been really hard dealing with a group that always does the exact opposite of what you instruct them. I can't imagine what that would be like. And then they would catch on and be like, hey, wait a minute, right? Often in these stories, we get frustrated. And here's the truth. The Israelites, the lesson there is not, man, look how awful they are. And I'm so glad I'm not like that. The Israelites they're the display of our hearts in people, in history, in action. What you're seeing them do is in us. It just may look a little bit different, but church, if we're frustrated with them, we're going to miss the lesson. And here's, I think, what the Lord wants to teach with manna. God isn't setting up a system that is forcing the Israelites into daily dependence. He's not creating dependence in the people. Church, he's revealing their dependence on him. They were, and we are here today, completely, 100% dependent on the Lord for life. All life. We're not 99% dependent. Like, we are 100%, and the Lord wants us to know that that's the position. That is reality, that we are a dependent people. And he's expressing it in physical terms here. You're dependent on me for actual daily bread, but there is more than a physical dependence that we have on the Lord. There's a spiritual dependence that we have on him for life. And yours may not, your version of, if we're strengthening the family to multiply, our version of weakness is not about gathering bread every day, but do you have a version of storing up just in case? Like, I trust God's plan A here, but I got a little plan B, just in case. There's a version of us that's like the Lord saying, Lord, I love for my people to have time of rest. You actually need it. I designed you. I know what you need. You need to rest. But we're like, yeah, but who's going to take care of me and my family? It's more profitable for me to keep working because ultimately you're saying it relies on me a little bit. You can take it further. Church, you can't store up spiritual life. It's meant to be drawn from the source daily. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to stay with the physical part of bread here. So he's given them these lessons in manna, and he doesn't stop there. Right? If we were back on our timeline, we're fast forwarding now to Mount Sinai, where Brian taught us about them getting the law. And really, if you look through Exodus later, you're going to see much of what the book is describing from this point for the rest of the book is not just the law, but really a lot of it is the description of how to build a tabernacle. A tabernacle, kids, just think about that as like God's tent. The people are going to be wandering in tents in a desert for a while, and God is saying, you know what? I want a tent too. With you. He said, I want you to know what kind of God I am. I am one that loves to dwell with you and be in your midst. And he starts to describe what the tabernacle should look like and how it is that you approach him. And there's this awesome moment at the heart of this facility, this tabernacle facility, where God's going to be. It says this, and you shall put, there's a throne room. There's a room that has veiled off where God's presence will actually be. And he says, there's going to be the Ark of the Covenant. And on top of the ark, you're going to put a mercy seat on top of the ark. And the ark, inside of it, you shall put the testimony. That's the law that you've just received. And it doesn't say it here, but it says in another part. He says, there's something else that goes in there as well. I want you to put a jar of the manna as a remembrance of how I fed you for the generations to learn the lesson of dependence. At the very heart of this facility, God is saying, you need me for life. And he doesn't stop there, because just outside the curtain, we read about this other piece of furniture that exists, and it's called it's the table of showbread. It's the bread of the presence. Exodus 25:30, and you shall set the bread of the presence. There's bread everywhere, see, on the table before me regularly. The Lord's saying you're going to have 12 loaves of bread, one for each of the tribes. It's a call, it's a reminder to you that not only do I give you sustenance for life, I'm doing it in a way of fellowship. Like I want to dine with you. I want to break bread with you. He's teaching in these lessons that I'm not just a distant God who rains down support from heaven. We view him that way sometimes, right? The distant guys, no, I'm in your midst. And then you're like, well, he's in our midst, but that doesn't say anything about his character or how he is in our midst. He's like, I'm like family. And my wife told me, she goes, do you know what you can actually translate the bread of the presence to? It's the bread of his face. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the goal is to be face to face. And face to face is just such a intimate phrase. The thing that I want to do with my daughters, right? The place I want to be with only people that I'm the most close to, like really connect eye to eye. The Lord's saying, I want to eat with you in such intimacy that we can call it the bread of my face. He longs to eat with them. That a lesson is being taught to the Israelites. That he's the source of life, both spiritually and physically. And when Jesus comes, he only ramps up this message. So many passages with Jesus on bread, but I'm just going to highlight a couple of them before we take communion together. In John 6, the Lord has taken bread, a few loaves, multiplied it to feed the thousands. And when people see this, they're like, I'm going to start following Jesus around. And Jesus knows it's not just because they want to hear his teachings, it's because he's a source of physical food. And so Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Your fathers, just like they're trying to do now, your fathers, they ate manna in the wilderness and then they died. But this is the bread that comes down from heaven. He's like, I am the bread that comes down from heaven. Are you catching the picture of what manna was pointing to? It was pointing to me. This is the bread that comes down from heaven so that when one eats of it, they will not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give you for the life of the world is my flesh. The physical picture of manna and their hunger and being satisfied, even with the loaves being multiplied, is a picture of that when his flesh is broken, we can have real life. It starts to become more clear as, right, the night he was going to be taken prisoner to be crucified, to have his flesh actually broken. They're celebrating the Passover. Jesus is with his disciples, and as they were eating, Jesus took bread. This is Matthew 26:26. As they were eating, Jesus took bread. And after blessing it, he broke it. And he gave it to the disciples. And he said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." He's still longing. He's like, I'm going on a fast as an expression of my longing to be with you and drink it anew in my Father's kingdom. This series, we're talking about strengthening the family to multiply. And I think we all know we're not talking about a physical strength, right? This family doesn't need to be physically strengthened. We're talking about being spiritually strengthened. But one, the physical, informs the other. If you've ever fasted, and I hope that you have fasted, if you haven't, come talk to us. We'll help explain it. But it is an essential part of our longing. As much as I hunger for physical food, even more I hunger to be with you, God. But something happens when you just miss a few meals. It's shocking how quickly you become physically weak. It's always amazing to me. I'm weak already. And yet, how many meals do we miss spiritually? This is me included, right? I'm like, I ate well yesterday. Well, yesterday's manna does not count for today. God said, you pray for the daily bread. He means it physically because he's the God who provides every breath we take. We're dependent on him physically. We're dependent on him spiritually. We're dependent on him completely. That's not a bad thing, because to get sustenance, he says, come into fellowship with me. Feast on the words that come from the mouth of the Father. Come and fellowship at the bread of my presence. Communion is called communion for a reason. It's a chance to actually step into that fellowship. And so we're gonna do that now. We have the tables around the room, and in a moment, I'm gonna ask you to just, as you're ready, to come and stand up and get the elements. If you get there first, you might have to pull the top of the tray off there to get access to the juice, and then we have a chance for you to grab the bread as well. And then return to your seat. But don't take the elements yet. We're going to take them all together, okay? But as we wait, it's time to commune with the Lord. You might say, well, how do I do that? What am I supposed to do during that time? Luke 22:19, as he's describing that Passover meal, it says that Jesus took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." So one of the things that we can do as we commune with the Lord is take time to joyfully confess our dependence. Spiritually, physically, remembering the provision we have in Jesus and his broken body. It's a time where I always confess sin. But it's not just a time of looking back either at the life of Jesus or looking back at my own life. It's also a time for us to look forward. 1 Corinthians 11, when Paul is talking about communion, he says, "Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." And then he says, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." That same until that Jesus said, I'm not going to drink of this wine until I can do it with you. And so there's this longing for the future at the same time. And so I'm both grateful for the fellowship I have in the moment, and it's also an expression of one day I'm going to be doing with this, with all of you and Jesus face to face. And so we can long and anticipation. Let that build up inside us. We're becoming spiritually strengthened, church.